So how many of you remember the good old days? I mean, we've all said something like that before, right? Talking about the times that we fondly reminisce about how things used to be. You know, how life was so much better before, well, whatever it is we happen to be complaining about at the time. Be it cell phones, the internet, computers, telephones, cars, electricity, and so on. These are all things that people have said, life was better before we had this. We talk about how people they just had better lives back in the past. Better morals, more drive, were harder working. It was just better. The thing is, it really wasn't. We just tend to remember things better because of the way we're wired as humans. There's kind of two parts to this, why we tend to look back on the past so fondly. The first part is we tend to remember good things more than we remember bad things. That's just how our brain works. And of course, the other half is we being humans, and especially us being Lutheran humans, we don't like change. So things must have been better before because things have changed so much now. For example, do you know how many Lutherans it takes to change a light bulb? 10. 1 to do it and 9 to kick him out for changing it because the old one was just fine. But the thing of it is, when you really think about it, the past wasn't this rosy golden age that we look back on. And I'm going to tell you about it because of one of my favorite things, video games. Now, I play a whole lot of video games, and I've been playing video games pretty much as long as I can remember. There were always video games around the house. Some of them, and this is one thing that definitely wasn't better in the past, you would take a cassette and put it in a tape player, press play, go and make a sandwich, and then come back and you could play the game. Now, granted, that game was actually pretty fun, but you had to make a sandwich to be able to play it because you had a whole lot of time to kill in the meantime. And I have been known on occasion, either on Facebook or other places on the internet, to rant and rave about the state of video games today. About how the only thing that we get is, basically a herd of money-grubbing suits who wouldn't know a good game if it jumped up and lapped them in the face, but they keep making video games and they keep milking cash cows because they're trying to make money and the games are really terrible and they're horrible and games were so much better back in the day. And I think that until I remember one video game. One single video game that almost single-handedly destroyed video games for all time. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Now, you might remember the movie. The movie was great. About a kid who finds an alien and gets in trouble, and then the alien has to get home. I don't really remember. It's been a while, and I was just a little kid when I saw it every Thanksgiving. The place where we went for Thanksgiving always showed E.T. every Thanksgiving. Like one TV had football, the other TV had E.T. The movie came out in 1982. I did not catch, that movie's as old as me? Wow. Now, in the early 80s, there was a game console that was going strong, the Atari 2600. This thing was top of the line, and it even looked good. It was black, and it had this nice wood paneling around it. I used to play one, a lot, actually. And Atari and Universal Pictures got together and decided that they were going to make a video game adaptation of E.T. It was bad. It was horrifically bad. It was almost unplayable. It was so bad. But they made thousands upon thousands of cartridges of this video game that sold for $50. And after a couple months, they couldn't sell for $1. There were so many unsold cartridges that Atari buried all of them in a landfill somewhere and they didn't find them again until 2013. E.T. is considered the worst video game of all time. In part because after that, Atari lost so much money that they went bankrupt, and if it wasn't for Nintendo doing some very clever marketing, the video game industry very well might have died in the early 80s. Nintendo, of course, was smart enough not to sell a game console, but an entertainment system. Clever marketing wins battles. So why am I talking about this? Largely it's because Christians have a bad habit of looking to the past as being better than today. At its extreme case, Christians look at the early church as this idyllic time, however you say that word, time, where everything was perfect and Christians were really Christians and it was great and we should do that. We should do what the early church did. The only problem with that is that's like searching for a unicorn. You can find unicorns in real life. You can. I have seen a real unicorn. The only problem is they are gray, ugly, fat, and mean. They're called rhinoceroses. As soon as you start looking for a unicorn, the only thing you're going to find is a rhinoceros. And the same way is how it was in the early church. Sure, we might have a much better picture of it than how we might think today was, but sometimes it wasn't pretty. For example, after Jesus was resurrected, one of his buddies refused to believe it until he could poke Jesus in the hands and side. I mean, kind of says something when if 10 of your best friends are telling you that your best friend is alive and not really dead, and that they saw him, for you to not, I mean, that really is kind of a big thing. Even though just last year I preached about how we really shouldn't give Thomas such a bad rap, we kind of should at the same time. We also have this image from the book of Acts that is about all the believers living together, sharing everything. Nobody's poor, nobody's needy, and it sounds really good. It sounds so good, in fact, that Psalm 133 says, "How good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity." Apparently, it's like being sticky and having oil poured all over your head and your clothes. Personally, I would think that if I had someone pour oil on my head and it went into my beard and onto my robe, I would not be very happy about it, and I would not feel very good and pleasant, but apparently it was a thing. But I want to look at Acts chapter 4, specifically the stuff that happens after our reading. Because we have this great picture, right? This beautiful picture about everyone, every Christian living together, sharing the gospel with everybody they meet, and it's great. There's a guy named Barnabas even that came up and he sold a field. He sold a field, he took the money, and he laid it at the apostles' feet so for everybody in the community of believers to use. And if you stop where we stopped, it sounds wonderful. But if you keep going, you hear about Ananias and Sapphira. Ananias and Sapphira thought they were being tricky, you see, because they also sold a field, and they laid the money at the apostles' feet. The only problem was they sold the field for, let's say 10,000. They gave the apostles 5,000 and said, "Oh yeah, we totally sold the field for 5,000." Trying to keep the other bit for themselves. Now, Ananias is the one who presented it to the church, and Peter caught on real quick. Peter having been given a little bit of help by something that had happened 2 chapters before, namely the showing up of the Holy Spirit. And so Ananias was caught in his lie. Peter confronted him, and Ananias fell down dead right there. The young man came in, wrapped up his body, and went off to bury him. A couple hours later, Sapphira came by, not having heard yet that Ananias had passed. And Peter asked, "So, what you sell the field for?" Sapphira said, well, 5,000. Oh, so you're going to lie to the Holy Spirit too, huh? Well, here the young men that buried your husband are coming in. They're going to bury you too. At this point, I feel really bad for those young men of the church. Because in the span of an afternoon, they dug 2 graves. You got to feel bad for them. The other thing this passage tells me is that the early church still had people in it. It wasn't this perfect place. And people are always going to be people. Even going as far back to the Old Testament, people are always going to be people. So we need to not look at the past as if it's this perfect thing. Sure, the past can inform us. We can learn things, but we need to look forward as Christians. As a church, we need to not look at how things were 10, 20, 50 years ago, but look at what God's going to do today. Look at what God is doing tomorrow. To do those things that Jesus told the disciples to go out and preach the resurrection. To do what John was writing to his readers, to tell about the light of God that shines so bright in the darkness. To preach that there is forgiveness of sin in Jesus Christ, to love our God and to love our neighbor, to do the work that God has for us, and to tell the good news of the resurrection. Not to look back and say, oh, it was so nice then, but to step forward in faith. To step forward and say, He is risen.